You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com.
Hello and welcome back to TV Obsessive Podcast, episode 91. My name is Ryan Kirksey, writer and contributor for TVObsessive.com, and once again, joined by Cameron Crane, the executive editor for the site. I think our question of the week was part of the Severance episode this week, Cameron. If you're stuck in a mudslide, are you more afraid of suffocating or drowning? And is there a difference?
Yeah, is there a difference? Is that I was actually listening to the official Severance pod, and they grapple with that a little bit too.
Yeah.
I mean, it got me thinking. I guess there is, in principle, a difference, but in context, I don't know. Like, isn't drowning a form of suffocating, or
I think
is it the
so.
fact that water gets into your lungs that would be the key distinction?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So I'll say suffocating.
Yeah, I think I would too. I have a fear of a death by drowning, so I would prefer almost anything else than that.
Because I guess I'm just thinking that, like, if it's mud, that it would be suffocation. Not I don't know,
Yeah, you just
because
can't
it's
breathe as opposed to getting all. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Who knows? Who
Uh,
knows?
Apologies if anyone thinks that was a spoiler. We are going to be digging in the latter part of the pod today to Severance season 2, episode 7, Chikhai Bardo. I don't know why I said it that way. Uh, which I'm looking forward to. But first, we'll talk a bit about what's been in the news, what I've been watching, and so on. Let's. You want to start with the traders here? It's February 28th.
Yeah, yeah. I'll start with the traders because I watched this stupid show, the most recent episode. I mean,
Yeah,
it was actually I thought a very very good episode because you really had some tension about what was going to happen, and then of course I don't know how much we
it's
can
just.
say, but they just I mean they leave you hanging every week.
I mean, but this was evil. I really thought this was evil. The way that because I agree, it was a good episode, and I liked how there was a little bit more strategizing.
Yep,
And of
yep.
course, we don't want to get into spoiler space here, and we won't really. But you know, I'll try to talk about it anyway. Where if you have seen the show, you'll know like kind of what I mean, maybe. But you know, I also thought, oh, I don't think that was the right strategic move that the traders did. And I was thinking about all of that, and that was really interesting. And then, yeah, I mean, this was just the show kind of always leaves you hanging off a cliff, but this was just
Yeah.
kind of egregious,
So this
I
is
thought.
almost the other side of the coin of remember the earlier in the season we're talking about, oh, I don't know these people from these reality shows. I don't know about their relationships. I don't know about all these backstories and all that. But then, without giving anything away, the sort of flip side of that is when you do have a relationship with someone and you're forced to make a decision, well, do I turn my back on them or do I do something to try to hurt them? That's when it becomes more compelling.
I always feel like that with this show. It gets kind of like more and more compelling as it goes along, because
Yeah.
you kind of focus in on a smaller group of characters, and as a viewer too, start deciding like who you care about and who you want to win. And it's interesting having watched multiple seasons and from multiple countries. It's
Yeah.
entirely possible I might watch the show and be rooting for one of the traders, or I might not.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't always. Well, I might be rooting for the faithfuls, but not
Yeah.
necessarily. Sometimes I might be rooting for one of the traders. So yeah, I almost knowing that you were in on this show. Also, actually, after I watched it last night, I almost sent you a DM and told you to wait a week.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously,
Well, I probably should have. I probably should
because I was like, ah. I mean, I told you when I got into the show over the summer, I would often watch like the first 5 or 10 minutes of the next episode
have.
just to get myself to a better resting place. So, yeah, I'm not super happy about that, Peacock. Come
Yeah.
on.
Well, so next week is the finale, it seems like, right?
I believe so. I believe
Oh,
so. And
maybe.
then
Okay.
and then presumably they'll have a reunion episode also, as they usually do, which this is like the only show where I find that worth watching,
Yeah.
basically, because it depends a little bit of what happens, but particularly if there is like some kind of emotional betrayal towards the end. It's like, I want to see these
Yeah.
people confront each other again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and then I think, and I don't have this verified for sure, but I feel like I've read or gotten the sense that once the US season ends, they will put the most recent UK season on Peacock.
That'd be good, especially if we can watch it as a binge. I don't know. I think that's what they've done typically is put them all up at once.
Yeah, actually, even with the US one, they put it all up at once with the first season.
Yeah.
And as the show's been successful, they say, well, we can milk this week to week, which I do think is a good plan. But like, come on, guys. That if people have seen this, they know what I'm talking about. If you watch the
Yeah.
trailers and you haven't seen it, like literally, you might want to consider just waiting on this episode until next week because you're going to be kind of pissed off.
Yes, you will.
Um,
Yes, you will.
Alan Cumming. Let's tie this news item in real quick. Alan Cumming, who's on the Traders and we love, apparently is going to be in the new season of Doctor Who, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, so you sent me this, and I've read this article, and you're gonna have to explain to me who this character is, what exactly it is that he's playing. I don't quite understand it, having not been as immersed in the show as you have.
Oh, I don't really know either.
Oh, okay, so
Um,
it's a new character.
I'm not positive about that either. I mean, I know they've been doing some stuff with the most recent iteration of Doctor Who,
Okay.
where they have been pulling in some things from old Doctor Who, like from the previous era. You know
Yeah,
this, right? Like
yeah,
Doctor Who
yeah.
started in
Like
what, the
70s.
60s,
Yeah, 60s, 70s.
70s. It was just the 60th anniversary, I think. And so then the new version, as it were, started in the aughts.
Yeah.
And that's all I've really watched. I've never gotten into the older stuff. So I know that they have Russell T Davies has been pulling in some of that stuff from old Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I know that like I believe oh man, what Neil Patrick Harris, I believe his character was like a character in one of the Doctor Who serials that's been lost.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, because
Okay.
this is a fun thing too. The BBC just like destroyed some tapes,
Yeah, when we watched
because
that episode together, you mentioned that there are just some
yeah,
episodes that you can never find.
yeah, or maybe someone has a copy out there somewhere. They recorded off their TV or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But it is almost frightening to me to think about because I don't know that it's changed that much when it comes down to it. With some of these companies potentially taking things off of their streamers and things, are they going to actually chuck any of them into the void?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff, to my understanding, from older eras of television where they say, "Oh, well, that's over," and they just like literally taped over it
Yeah.
or threw the film away. I
Oh boy.
was like, "All
Well,
right, we're done with that."
well, Alan Cumming will play an animated character called Mr. Ringading in Doctor Who.
It sounds fun.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I can say. And then Doctor Who comes back in April. I believe we also got the release date here as part of this news. So yeah, looking forward to that. I'll go ahead and watch it. I had my quibbles about the end of the last season, but whatever. I'll put them in the past and move forward. And kind of curious to see what they do.
Yeah.
Um, Also curious to see what they do with Paradise. We want to talk about that briefly. I believe there's one episode left on the horizon. This week's episode was like, hey, intense stuff going on.
Yeah. Oddly, so some parallels, if you want to call on that, between this week's episode of Paradise and this week's episode of Severance. Gonna look at it that way. I don't know, man. Is this show good or is it just fun?
I think it might just be fun, but
Yeah. Because yes, you're
is
right.
it?
This episode was intense. It was quite intense.
This is a good episode.
Yeah.
This one I will say this was a good episode
Yeah.
of television in terms of just feeling this tight sequence of action, the tension that cuts throughout it.
Yeah.
The fact that my Hulu started buffering with 5 minutes left in the episode was like driving me crazy. It kept
Oh
doing that
boy.
thing where it's like, this is not available, and so you refresh and then it
Yeah.
would go back like 60 seconds. So
Oh no.
I probably watched the same minute of the episode 3 or 4 times because it did it several times. It's like, God
Oh
damn
no.
it, come on. I don't want to see the end of the episode. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how it ends. And then I'm gonna be really curious to see when Silo comes back, because we don't know unless you have, in the meantime, read the books, because I know
Nope.
you got them for Christmas.
I
Um,
stopped where we stopped. So
all
I'm
right. So
done.
we don't know the background story in Silo. but it's in books, right? So that part of me is wondering, like, is it going to be basically the same thing? Like, did Paradise rip off, you know, the idea? Because there are some similarities, but
Yes, there are. Yes,
um,
there are.
apologies if that was a spoiler for anyone. You watch Paradise. Everyone's watching Paradise.
Yeah, yeah. Watch it. It's fun. It's really fun.
It is. There is, and then it's going to get another season.
It
So we'll
is.
see where
Yes.
that goes. Also going to get another season, which I knew this because I seen it in press releases and such, but I still am not entirely not entirely sure how it's getting a second season or what the second season is going to look like. And I'm talking here about the rehearsal.
Are you not sure how because of a production or secrecy standpoint, or not sure from a moral or ethical standpoint how it's going to get a second season?
I mean, more like from a narrative standpoint,
Yeah.
because the first season did ultimately have a narrative.
Yes.
It is definitely on the line between fiction and reality, but in a meaningful way, it is fiction where you've got like Nathan Fielder's playing a version of himself. He's playing a character,
Yeah.
but it intersects. And I mean, I find the show really interesting. I know that like Alan Sepinwall had literal like negative moral judgments about how season one ended, for real.
Yeah.
But yeah, just it's more just where does it go? Does it connect up with what happened in season one? Or
Hmm.
are there ways to like, because I feel like season one just it kept kind of pushing it forward and spinning it, not like it
Yeah.
was a shocking twist, but just kind of like deeper and deeper down a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
as it were. I don't know.
I think what I found interesting about season one, there are a lot of things interesting about it, but clearly the first episode of season one was tremendously different than the remainder of the season. Right? The remainder of the season, there was this long arc of things that were done and were accomplished, and the people had some issues with at the end. I would have watched the season no matter which way it is. Let's just looking forward to season two. If it was just episodic things like episode one of the first season, I'd watch that. If it was more of like a narrative arc for a whole season, I would do that too. I just was fascinated enough by the first one.
Same, yeah. And I would have enjoyed the first one, I think, if it had just been more episodic and now he's got a
Mhm.
different client and so on. So I found it kind of surprising as it didn't go that way. Curiouser and Curiouser was the Alice in Wonderland line that I wanted
Yes.
to evoke here. Yeah, I just got curiouser and curiouser as we went on. So I mean, with that in mind, with what happened with season one, I don't expect with season two they'll just say, "Oh, well, now it'll just be
Yeah.
episodic," you know. Um,
There'll be a
I
bit
feel
of
like it
the
has to be,
pushing the edge of the envelope even more. Let's say. I mean, that's what I would expect with Nathan Fielder.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And as a side note, I'm also on board for more seasons of The Curse. That
Yep.
also doesn't
Yep.
feel possible, but apparently they have an idea. I've read that. I don't think it's been greenlit, on that one. But season two of The Rehearsal also coming this
Yes.
spring. April 20th, I believe, is the date on this one.
All this stuff is
Um,
so soon. I mean, we're just flying now in the amount of new stuff we're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read on season one of the rehearsal. If people are curious to go back and read my recaps there. I wrote week to week, and I figure I probably will with season two as well. What it's
Yeah.
worth
Okay.
on TVObscast.com.
What's
Let's see.
What's next? A couple of Peacock related items. We had talked before about maybe the unnecessary or we're not so sure that they should do this Office spinoff about a
Yeah,
Midwestern newspaper. Now it comes out that the sort of the tie-in or the through line between the two is going to be Oscar Nunez. I guess apparently he's going to have moved and taken a job with this newspaper as an accountant for them, and so same universe, same character. I don't know that one character of the original, 15 of that ensemble cast makes me want to watch it anymore, but there's some that they must be trying to say we're trying to get some of that old audience back into this.
yeah. I'm still more curious about the idea and how that cashes out than anything, because you're going to a newspaper. It's going to be a newspaper that's in financial trouble, right?
Yes.
and so he's the accountant. And okay, it's starting to come into view. I just hope that there is a sufficient idea here for this to work, as opposed to it being, I don't know, just hey, let's make more Office. The Office is
Yeah.
popular, so we'll see about that one. Also, this is also Peacock. I don't know if this is what you all had in mind. Poker Face season 2.
Yes.
Finally going to get that. The first season was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I got to thinking. I guess it just escaped me how long ago this actually was, and I think it was a pretty quickly renewed. You and I both, I think, like this. Natasha Lyonne led sort of interesting take on the sort of mystery or murder of the week genre. But yeah, finally we're gonna get some of it coming back. I think all that we have now are some production photos from episodes that are being worked on now. John Mulaney, Cynthia Erivo, Katie Holmes, just some other names coming back as guest stars from episode to episode. So not much information other than that, but it's definitely coming. And yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of the first season.
Yeah. And I think coming, I don't know, at least I was getting the sense it was coming relatively soon, but I guess you're right. We haven't exactly gotten a release date. Definitely been taking a long time for various reasons, including the strikes and so on.
Yeah,
Also taking a very long time is Euphoria season 3,
yeah.
which apparently now Sharon Stone has signed on to join the cast. Any thoughts on that? You haven't, or have you? You haven't watched the show, have you?
No, I've not checked out any Euphoria before. I mean, I just know about it in terms of the names that have been on it previously, because some of those will be, some of those won't be, some of those can't be, unfortunately, anymore. But I guess Sharon Stone is a pretty big grab for. I guess this is going to be the last season of Euphoria. Do we know that for certain?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I mean, it's already, this is going to be weird because we know there's going to be a time jump.
yeah,
They are no longer going to be in high school. And of course, that makes sense because it's been several years since season 2, for one thing. So, all the actors are older. And of course, they were already older than high school students in the first place. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I have almost no idea what they're going to do in season 3. Um, if if season 3 is a smash success and everyone enjoyed making it and HBO wants more, I wouldn't rule anything out, but
Yeah.
I think by all accounts this is going to be the final season.
Yeah, I just was looking at this list of names of people that are on this show, the ones that have confirmed that they're returning, such as I believe all of these are now Oscar nominated actors and actresses. Zendaya, Jacob Elordi, Coleman Domingo, I believe Sharon Stone might have been for Casinos. I mean, this is powerhouse stuff. It's just amazing that they're getting this group back together. I think it's going to be after 4 years this will finally air.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I like, in what sense is it the same show? I mean, of course there are character dynamics and there is a way in which it definitely could be the same show with regard to Zendaya's character in particular. I can't even remember a character's name. It's been so long since the show's been on. I have to look up her name. Anyhow, I'll probably check that out. I have very mixed feelings about Euphoria. And part of me, Ryan, part of me does want you to go watch it and just report back. I just
Yeah,
want
I
your
should.
reaction. Like, I'm not saying like, hey, this is good, you should watch it. I'm saying like, I want to know how you'd react.
All I know is the meme of Sydney Sweeney in front of the mirror, laughing, crying. That's the only thing I know about Euphoria, really. And they do a lot of drugs. That's all my whole concept of the show.
Yeah, well, it's okay. So I mean, I'll go ahead and go there because maybe this isn't much of a spoiler, but that's what I meant about Zendaya's character. There's a definite through line of her struggles with addiction.
Yeah, okay.
So like that could be the big thing that carries forward.
Interesting. Okay.
So I'll
Okay.
probably watch that. I will definitely watch Foundation. Speaking of things that are taking a long time to get a third season, apparently we've also got a change in the showrunner. David S. Goyer's out. Ian Goldberg is in. I'm not sure how worried to be about that as a fan of the show. And I didn't do more research into like how worried the fandom is or anything
Yeah.
like that. Because I seem to recall that David S. Goyer had like an 8 season plan.
Okay.
That's in the back of my mind. But if he's out as showrunner, then what does that do to the whole thing? You know?
So I know we've
Um,
talked about this show before, but just sort of in comparison to the other Apple science fiction things that we've talked about, where do you rank Foundation? Do you see it as strong with some of the other things that we've been doing together?
it's big and expensive and
Yeah.
beautiful and well acted for sure. And Lee Pace is amazing. And I'm also a big fan of that guy whose name, oh, there it is, Jared Harris. Who's this? Come on, come on, come on, come on. And I haven't read the source material on this one. That's always a question. I do understand that they're playing with it a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know that um I started making the argument even after season 2 that the show maybe isn't science fiction but
Yeah.
is fantasy. But wait, that's too much to go into right now. I'm sorry, that's too much. Um, uh, maybe it might feel more like Star Wars
Yeah.
than The Expanse. How about that? We'll
Okay.
see that there.
Okay. Okay.
But potentially quite fun.
I almost picked up a copy of Foundation at half price books the other day, so I mean I am interested in this. So I might try to check this out before we get another season.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend it. In fact,
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely entertaining and just maybe not um deep. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. There's some interesting stuff to think about. So it depends, like what kind of
Yeah.
criteria you're applying when you're talking about science fiction. At least for me, part of why I enjoy science fiction is because it raises kind of interesting philosophical questions, almost by
Yeah.
definition. You know what I mean? But maybe not always. Maybe sometimes it's lasers in space.
Yeah.
And Foundation's a little bit in between on that regard, I would say.
Yeah. Well, another speaking of Star Wars and perhaps science fiction, I've talked to you about how much I love Andor season one. Season two is coming very soon. I think we have a date now. I forget what it is, but I believe it's coming in April. This will be a 12 episode season. We've broken down into which this is very strange why they do it this way. 4 3 episode chunks. Um, I understood when they did Andor season one why they did the first 3 episodes at once because it was one kind of long story. And if you were to episodes one and two were actually kind of boring, and if you broke them up, it may have, I think, not attracted as many people. But once the end of three came, it was just this fascinating story. Um, we got a trailer for the new season coming April 22nd. To me, it looked great, but it also looks very different than the first season. The first season was very dark and sort of calamitous and a lot of sort of drama and spy intrigue. This looks like a lot more Star Wars, which I'm not opposed to, but I just hope they don't get away from a lot of the sort of very interesting character stuff that they did in the first season.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you because I've seen so many people praise Andor and in ways that make me really intrigued, even as someone who has I stopped watching Star Wars. I don't know what verb to use. I was going to use a verb like renounced, but that feels like almost too strong and not quite appropriate, right? Like Star Wars doesn't care
Yeah.
whether I watch it. Um, but could I watch Andor when I haven't seen any of the other Star Wars TV shows or anything like that? Would
Yes,
it
I
work?
think absolutely because so Andor. I mean, this is I mean fairly common knowledge at this point. Andor is Star Wars without the Force, without lightsabers, without the big names of Skywalker and Vader and Palpatine, and it's none of those names inside of it. It is leading up to the events of the Rogue One movie, so even having not seen the Rogue One movie, I think someone could be really intrigued by this because it's really, especially the first season, is about what is it like when an authoritarian regime starts taking over, and what does it mean for the everyman?
Yeah,
And so it's just a very, very interesting story. You strip all that science fiction stuff away, and you're left with some pretty compelling stuff.
interesting. I have seen Rogue One. Didn't much care for it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't want to go. I don't want to start ranting against Star Wars again, but I did. People were talking about Rogue One, how much they liked it. I was like, okay, I'll check this out. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's Star Wars is a really weird one for me because there was a time in my life when I absolutely loved the original trilogy
Yeah.
so much. And I was so excited for the prequels and then so disappointed. And it's like nothing has been good
Yeah.
since that time. So I finally just kind of gave up. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I at some level I still really like the original three films, I guess, and the Ewok movies.
Yeah. That's right.
But you know, anyhow. Just a couple more things. Try to be kind of quick here, so we make sure we have enough time to talk about Severance.
Yep.
Apparently, there's going to be a Punisher special that they're going to do on Disney Plus, which
Yeah. So this
sounds
is,
cool.
I'm not surprised by this because, so it's been in all the trailers. The Punisher will be in the new Daredevil Born Again show. He was in the previous
Yeah,
iteration in Netflix, so I'm very excited about that. This seems to be the new model, right? They did this one-off with Werewolf by Night, this one-off with the Guardians Christmas special, this one-off with um, I forget what it was now, but Marvel started doing these. We're going to do a lot fewer 10, 12 episode shows, and we're going to focus more on some core characters that are going to be in these shows, our movies, and every once in a while we'll do a special presentation, sort of like a one-shot comic book that they give out to fans. So this doesn't surprise me, and I think that's good. I think you can dilute some of these characters if you start doing too much with them. Put them in the Daredevil show where it makes sense, or where there's some narrative history there. I'd be excited to see just these sort of little things pop up here and there in the Marvel universe.
yeah. I mean, this was another one where I enjoyed the Punisher show on Netflix. So I'm really kind of intrigued because as you know, I also kind of gave up / stopped watching
Yeah.
Marvel stuff. But there was a time when I was into all of these next Netflix shows and seeing this stuff about Daredevil Born Again and so on, and how they're meaningfully bringing that back, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
they've got the same actors and all of that. So I am intrigued and may go ahead and jump in on some of that stuff. We'll see. We'll see. I will apparently have a Disney Plus subscription so I can watch Doctor Who, right? So
Yeah.
the door's open. Do I watch the other stuff while I've got
Might as
Disney
well.
Plus? It's
Might as
because
well.
I want to watch Doctor Who. One last thing on Disney Plus. I don't think this actually looks very good, but they're launching some kind of Sports Center Plus ESPN thing that's like it actually sounds sort of like Sports Center minus because it's
Yeah.
not going to be the Sports Center people. It's going to be some pared down version or something. I don't
I
know. What do
mean,
you think
we
about
already
this?
have Sports Center. We already have Get Up or whatever the morning program is. We've got ESPN News. We've got ESPN two. I don't know that we need another version of this. I also don't know when is the last time I sat down and watched an hour of Sports Center as opposed to just getting the clips of whatever I want to watch.
Well, that's part of what I was going to say here. Now, I mean, I think the distinction would be that this Sports Center Plus thingy is going to be available if you just have Disney Plus,
Yeah.
right? Whereas the other ESPN stuff you have to bundle and get ESPN Plus and all of that. I don't know. I also found myself thinking about it and wanting to almost throw in here, it's striking to me how I feel like ESPN has hollowed itself out and it's not nearly as good as it used to be. And I rarely watch it anymore,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
especially for football.
And I guess you
Um,
you also saw the news. It's been no surprise. ESPN has kind of been all in on football and basketball. MLB actually has pulled out of their agreement. They do Sunday night baseball. MLB has
oh,
pulled out of that agreement and they are ending it early because they are dissatisfied with ESPN's lack of coverage of baseball.
oh
Right.
well.
So yeah, there's some issues going on over there, and the brand itself, Sports Center, yeah, it's just not what it used to be.
Yeah, I'm thinking primarily about that kind of stuff and the and the commentary and the analysis. And I think I saw that Around the Horn is going to end, which I always enjoyed. So, and I'm not positive about that or when it's going to happen, but just curious. I mean, I engage with a lot of sports type content, usually through YouTube, but even there's ESPN stuff on YouTube, but I watch way more stuff from NBC.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's striking to me how like NFL and NBC really, they made a decision a few years ago that they were going to take over the football space and pretty well succeeded in my mind.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they've done a terrific job. I mean, basically your entire Sunday afternoon can be NBC or Peacock football, fantasy football, and gambling football if you want. It's pretty expansive.
Yeah, and you got like Matthew Berry has a show, Chris Sims has a show, Mike Florio has a show. There's just so much stuff. Anyhow, um, let's segue to Severance. You want to talk about the ratings?
Yeah, no,
Before
just interesting that it came out this week. We knew and we've heard about how popular it's been. A lot of stories are reporting that this is now passed in terms of, I guess, viewers per season. Even Ted Lasso is Apple TV's most popular show, and
yeah,
so now we're getting official reports that yes, amongst the streamers, Severance is the most watched show right now. I don't think there's any surprise. It's not really up against much right now, and it sort of had this head start against things like Yellow Jackets, and certainly a bigger audience than streamers like Showtime. But Ben Stiller and Adam Scott comment on it a lot about the podcast. Like, yeah, we can tell a lot more people are watching this thing.
yeah, and they're also really impressed by how close attention we're paying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, the show's so well made, it holds up to that scrutiny. So that's always great. I do at times wonder when I see stuff like this and just see the number of people commenting on social media and stuff like this. Like, what are the chances at the end of the day that the show has become too popular?
Yeah.
Right, like because there's that potential effect of at the end people being dissatisfied, but like people like you and I are probably going to sit here and be like, that was great.
Yeah.
No, I don't want you to answer all the questions. What are you talking about? You know what I mean?
That's right.
Let the mystery be, that kind of thing. And there are going to be other people out there be like, you did not in detail answer all of the questions I have written down. So I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully it'll all go well. But
Let's get
yeah, so
into it.
this week's episode, we'll talk about it on the other side after we put some music in. This is your spoiler warning. Um, everything is on the table here through season 2, episode 7, Chikhai Bardo. So yeah, okay. We'll be back with you in about 10 seconds.
Okay, we are here to talk about Severance, Season 2, Episode 7, Chikhai Bardo. This episode is written by Dan Erickson and Mark Friedman. It is directed by Jessica Lee Gagne, who's also the cinematographer for the show. In flashbacks, Mark and Gemma meet at a Lumen blood drive at their university. They eventually get married, but have trouble producing children, so they go to a Lumen fertility clinic. Shortly after this visit, Gemma goes to a party by herself where she, quote unquote, dies in an accident. Police come and report that death to Mark. Sometime after her death, Gemma lives on the testing floor at Lumen. She regularly is forced to visit a series of rooms that have the same names as some of the Lumen MDR files. Each of those rooms uncovers a different any version where Gemma has to deal with traumatic or emotional experiences. Dr. Maurer and Mr. Drummond oversee all of this and frequently talk with her and interview her about these experiences. At one point, Gemma attempts to break out by knocking out Dr. Maurer, but she goes up the elevator. She arrives on the severed floor of Lumen and turns into Miss Casey. Mr. Milchick demands she go back into the elevator. Mark remains unconscious after his surgery. Dr. Ragabi tells Devin he's going to be okay, but Devin wants to call Miss Cobell for help. Ragabi does not like that, refuses it, and leaves at the suggestion of Cobell getting involved again. Shortly after, Mark wakes up, either remembered or dreamt a lot about Gemma. This episode, I think much anticipated, highly discussed. I'm seeing mostly critically acclaimed. You and I might have similar thoughts on this, and you have a piece up on this already on the site. General
I
thoughts
do.
about this episode?
I do. Um, yeah, and I think we should start there. It does seem like a lot of the reaction is incredibly positive, like I'm seeing people on Blue Sky saying this is like the best episode of television ever made. So, and I didn't love it to that extent, but I think what's interesting for us to talk about is why.
Yeah.
I don't want to be overly negative. I think it was a good episode. I think it was fine, but I find myself thinking since I watched it, what is it about it that didn't quite land for me? What didn't work for me? And
Hmm.
my starting place was that it didn't really feel like Severance. And well, I think we can dig into that in some ways that hopefully we will find interesting. What about you? Initial reactions?
Yeah, I think my first gut reaction, I think I messaged you right after I finished it, just that I was thrown a bit by the multiple timelines. After some days, I've sort of, conceptualized how all that worked. I thought this episode was beautiful in the way that it's shot and the way that it's visioned and sort of how it goes back and forth between the sort of ways that they approach the production in terms of the look backs versus the modern. And they talk a lot about this on the official Severance podcast. I just, it answered a lot of questions. But I don't know. We talked some about maybe I would have appreciated more if it's just more of a linear story that was told. But just there were some things with the jumping back and forth between timelines that didn't sit quite right with how I wanted to frame this within the entire show.
That's interesting because I'm tempted to say I wanted it to be weirder.
Hmm.
Um, and I started thinking about the way it was directed.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Jessica Lee Gagne. This is her first director credit. She's been the cinematographer on the show and so on. And she is on the official podcast this week. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it.
Yep.
I sort of made a point and I wanted to listen to that part of the official pod. And so, all right, apologies if this is like a kind of a long what monologue on my part. But I've really been thinking about it because I kind of found myself appreciating the episode more in retrospect than when I watched it. Right. Like when I watched it the first time, I kept feeling sort of dissatisfied. I kept feeling like this doesn't really feel like Severance. And the other thing that maybe should be a separate topic is it wasn't really like landing for me emotionally in a
Mm.
powerful way. But then when I look back on it, I think, oh, well, I see what they were doing. It's a great idea and so on. So I watched the episode again and I was really focused on the um, direction or on the cinematography.
Yeah.
Um, you know, because I guess Gagne also was often her own cinematographer, which she said on the podcast may have been a mistake, right? Um, but regardless, I think that's sort of beside the point insofar as it's the director who's making the decisions
Yeah.
that I'm going to refer to. And what stood out to me in this episode, particularly on that second watch where I was really attending to how it's shot,
Yeah.
there's a lot of panning. There's a lot
Mm.
of panning. There's a lot of kind of quick cuts. And this is different from other episodes of Severance. And I think that I mean, obviously it was intentional, but I think maybe beyond that, it was intentional in a particular way in terms of this episode being distinctive.
Yeah.
But to me, it ended up with this effect of I want to be careful about this because I do think from a technical point of view, it's really, really, really well done.
Yes. Yes.
But maybe a big but, it didn't feel very interesting to me visually. The kind of visual language employed felt very I don't know if cliche is quite the right word, but it's like there's almost like a stock visual language that's deployed
Mhm.
in a lot of films and a lot of TV shows, and a lot of this felt like that to me.
Yeah.
And even when it tried to get weird, it didn't really get weird.
Yeah,
You know,
I remember Gagne talking about that on the podcast, the idea of how they were going to decide to invoke this idea of the past or the nostalgia or the life that the two of them had together. And she eventually came to the idea of, oh, it's a simple choice. If you just shoot it with this type of camera and this type of way, that's always sort of in this industry meant to invoke nostalgia or invoke, looking back to something. And so it was a sort of like a, we'll just do what everybody has done. And
well,
so
I
it
definitely
wasn't
think
the
that's part of
uniqueness
it.
of the
They
show.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
They shot the
yeah,
flashbacks on film.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So there's just not the uniqueness you maybe you would have expected. And then I certainly don't want to make light of the arc of their marriage, but that's I was touched by it, but it's a story that's been told a million times before on television and TV, right? They meet, things are great, get married, happy life, tragedy, heartbreak, overcome, then things are good again before this moment happens, right? That we sort of think of when she leaves. So that there was no uniqueness there either, I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, to point to one specific example, at sort of the end of the flashbacks, right? When the cops come to Mark, you don't actually see him talking to the cops, right? But the way it is shot,
Hmm.
what happened, right? From a certain point of view, that's very cool.
Yeah.
That just the visual language can operate that way. But at the same time, the reason that it works is because we've seen that before lots
Yeah.
of times.
Yeah.
Like that same kind of way of communicating visually. Um, so I mean that's okay. I mean, I don't mean it's the biggest critique in the world necessarily, but I happened to also go back and rewatch Woe's Hollow last night just for fun, just
Yeah.
because I love the episode. And I was thinking about this kind of stuff percolating in my mind, and that episode is shot in an entirely different way,
Yeah.
where the camera's
Yeah.
soft and steady and so on, right? There really is a lot of panning in episode 7 here, and the camera's almost never steady if you pay
Mm.
attention to it. So look, at a certain level, maybe it's just a matter of personal taste,
Yeah.
right? It's like my favorite film director is David Lynch. You know what I mean? And like talk about someone who will hold the shot too long.
Right.
Like David Lynch will hold the shot so long it starts to be uncomfortable because he's held the shot so long, right? And this
Yeah.
is totally the opposite from that. Nothing's held that long. It's always kind of quicker and more in line with how I mean lots of things are. And look again, it's very well done. And I
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
myself thinking a lot about that ultimately.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get into some of the plot here because I think it was predicted and perhaps anticipated that we would get a flashback episode, right? Sort of see the Mark and Gemma story. We knew that they were both at a university. We knew they were professors. We knew that they would come to have this relationship together. So now it's the idea of, okay, we have all of this stuff now of they were at a Lumen blood drive. They went to a Lumen fertility clinic. They were giving Lumen all this personal information. So now there are these questions that exist about to what extent do we believe A, that Gemma was in an accident and Lumen just sort of claimed her, and B, I've even seen some speculation of was Gemma in on this because she was sort of buying into things that Lumen was doing and was interested in their Bardo cards and all these different things that she was starting to get attached to. What do we think now about sort of this idea of how Gemma got there as opposed to just, oh, she was in a car crash, she died. Oh, not really.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself after this episode thinking there she was not in a car crash. Her car may have crashed after Lumen kidnapped her, but she was. I don't think she. I mean, we're not really seeing evidence of her having been, even seriously injured in a car crash.
Yep.
That could be wrong. We don't know for sure.
Yep.
We don't get. It would have potentially been interesting to me if we'd gotten Gemma's perspective on what happened that night. It's an interesting thing because it's like, on the one hand, there's a lot of information in this episode, but on the other hand, I don't know, is there really?
Yeah.
Like, how much do we really learn?
What information was given actually opened up doors to all new sets of things we don't know, such as, yeah, I think there was a lot of assumption out there that Gemma was not, it's not as simple a story as was in a car accident and they've revived her, resurrected her, or done something to her. But does that mean that they kidnapped her? Does that mean that she did something willfully? Does that mean that she was signed up for? We just don't have those answers now. It seems like there's a lot of ambiguity that could take place there.
Yeah, and I kind of found myself wishing that they'd gone ahead and answered that question.
Yeah.
Because I mean, how much you're going to keep withholding, and how do you find ways that make narrative sense to answer some of these questions?
Yep.
There was a way to do it here. So is there a good reason to withhold that bit? Because it does matter in my mind. I mean, I presume we'll find out what they're doing with Gemma, like what the long game is, what Cold Harbor is in one way or another. But I had kind of been thinking that this was a matter of playing Dr. Frankenstein with Gemma's corpse or something, right?
Right.
And
Right.
now I'm no longer thinking that. And that makes a
Exactly.
big difference in terms of how I'm thinking about, well, what is Lumen up to? And everything they say is really vague, like we're going to sire a new world where everyone will benefit. And it's like, at some point it needs to start making a little
Yeah.
bit more sense.
I wish they had given us the Gemma point of view, especially because there were multiple things she says in this episode, such as, I want to go see Mark. Once I'm done, will I be able to go out again? Will I be able to leave? She tries to break out, right? So it's the sense of, okay, that those actions and words don't tell us that she's in on this or wants to be a part of this. So why not show us, she was captured, or Lumen decided that she was special because of all this information they had about her, so they just took her one night, something.
I mean, that's sort of what I'm thinking, is that, okay, well, they've gathered this information based on her blood, based on the fertility clinic, which is also Lumen. Then they start sending her stuff like a duck, a rabbit, or whatever, duck rabbit, and the Bardo card, which is a direct connection. I think it's even the same card we saw Dylan steal
Yep.
in season 1. And so there are lots of indications there that they were selecting her to be this test subject, you know. So then that makes me think she didn't get into a car accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if that means that they abducted her that night, it's almost like, well, why not just show that if
Why
that's
not
the
just show
answer,
that?
you know?
And
Even
I
whatever.
love speculating about the idea that, they had all this information, DNA, blood, all of these physical things that make up Gemma. Did they somehow make a Gemma body and pass that? Mark has a box of remains in his basement. Now those
Mhm.
are cremated remains. So did he get to see Gemma before? Presumably yes. So, what did they do? How did they manipulate that? I'd be curious to know that story as well.
Okay, so here's a possibility that could explain why they don't show us what happened. Maybe she actually did get into a car accident and died, and the Gemma in the testing floor is a clone or something like that.
Yeah, certainly could be a yeah, fully developed human that yeah, I guess that they've made a new Gemma who would know Mark, who would know her history, who would know all these things, but they're trying to make it a severed person as well. So that's where all these different experiences start. I mean, I still think it's the real Gemma, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's the thing. I don't think it's that. I don't really want it to be that either. Not that
No.
that matters, but I don't really think it's that. I think this is the real Gemma. Um, And when I say I don't want it to be that, it's because to the extent that there was something emotionally powerful in this episode, it would really undermine it a bit if we found out that it was a clone,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think. But let's talk about that a little bit more because, again, I'm not trying to be too negative, but did you feel like we needed all of the flashbacks at an emotional level? Because at first I was really thinking we didn't. And I kind of said that in my article on TVObscast.com. But the more I think about it, maybe I was wrong. Maybe we kind of did need more here. What did you think on that
I,
level, like
I found
between Gemma
myself,
and Mark?
yeah, I found myself when I was reading your piece agreeing with you that somehow, even though we have not really seen them much together, except for a very cold surface level Mark and Miss Casey interaction, somehow they have still displayed to us how much love they had for one another, how much care that they had for each other, how devastated Mark was when this happened. And so, yeah, I found myself thinking, yeah, that's true. They have shown us sort of the, or made us believe in the emotional connection that they had even before this episode. I do appreciate some of the just, this is who they are and how they met and sort of how they got to the point that it's, so I think some of that was needed. I might have actually liked to include some of the perhaps corresponding experiences or memories that go with why doing these certain things in certain rooms, right? Did she have a traumatic dentist experience, a traumatic Christmas experience, an almost plane crash, these types of things that are happening in the rooms. We'd like to see some of that.
Let's run through that really quick because there is some stuff there, right? And so this is one of the hazards of the fact that I actually wrote that article several days ago, and then I'm thinking about it all week. But the nice thing is we get to do a podcast where I can mention things that I didn't get in my article.
Yeah.
So hopefully people both read that and listen here. But particularly watching it again, there are all right. So here are the moments that stood out to me that this might not be an exhaustive list. I'm sure
Okay.
someone might be pouring through the episode with an even finer tooth comb than I have so far. The thank you cards, right? Um, there is a moment when Mark says to Gemma, "You hate writing thank you cards,"
Yeah, that's true.
in the flashback. There's a Christmas tree in the flashback. There is when Gemma is leaving the night that she quote unquote died or whatever. She says, "I love you." Mark doesn't say it back. She's like, "Hey, I said I love you." And it's like, "Oh yeah, sorry," right? We see a repetition of that also between whatever any version of Gemma and Dr. Meyer on the testing floor. Why the dentist? I don't know.
Yeah.
Why the turbulent plane? I'm gonna go with Lost reference. I don't know. But like I'm not fitting it into the narrative. But if you think about like even some of those connections between what they're doing and Mark and Gemma's life,
Yeah.
there's a potentially really disturbing implication there that they had them under surveillance, like in their house.
Yeah, I do wonder. Yeah, I don't think we know how much time has passed between when they meet at the blood drive and her accident, but it's a significant period of time. I mean, it's months or years or
Mhm.
somewhere in that neighborhood. So, yeah, there could be a discovery of, oh, these people have what we're looking for and something genetically, physically, biologically. And so they are, yeah, under Lumen's watch for some period of time before this all happens. I could certainly see that being part of it.
Yeah, I think it might be. I think that's one thing we can read in here.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is, it's still like, well, what the hell are they doing? Why are they? I understand that they want that part of what's going on with Gemma is how to put this, like multiple severance, that you severed multiple times, that there
Yeah.
were all of these different versions of her, not just Indy and Audi, but apparently Audi, right? Like Gemma, and
Yeah.
then at least seven Indies that we're aware of.
At least, yes, at least seven. And I guess we should sort of mechanically think about this. Do you believe that at one point there is the conversation between Maurer and Drummond of did the severance barrier hold? I think you've referenced this, and
Mhm.
um, And so she is going into these rooms as any severed version of herself to see if those relived moments at all bring her back to or create memories in her that would mean that there's still a link between the Audi and any version of Gemma.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is it just that they're doing this in order to test the barriers, as it were? I mean, that makes some sense. But there's another question here about the connection between those rooms and what MDR is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all names of the files that we've seen pop up on computer screens and when they're mining data.
Many of which have been completed. I haven't done the work of pairing up the rooms we saw with the completed files, but just working from memory, I believe that those are completed files.
Yeah.
I think they're all completed files, but I'm not positive on that front.
And
speaking of which, let's play a fun little game we'll throw in here. The name, one of those file names, one of those room names, is my middle name. You want to guess which one?
No way. Oh, I don't have the list in front of me.
Okay.
Allentown. That's the one that just
Cameron Allentown, Craig. Come on, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
What is it? What's the middle name?
Cairns.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, does that mean anything? I mean, it must be a meaning, obviously, to the name, but
well, I mean, yes, it's a family name, but also a cairn is like a stack of stones, potentially.
Okay.
It could be a funeral monument kind of thing, but I'm not sure if it always is.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, we get a reference to the fact that apparently the Cold Harbor name has just been put up on the door. She hasn't gone in there yet. And so I guess we're just obviously we've seen that on the Mark side. We've seen that she's not gone in this room yet. We've seen how important it is to Lumen. We know the finale of the season is named Cold Harbor. So is this like the final boss room, as it were? And what's going to happen there? Is Mark going to be in there? Sort of what's going to happen in that when we get to that room?
She's going to sire a new world, and everyone will benefit. I mean,
exactly.
Clear
as day. Yes,
it's going to be a monumental event akin to the invention of fire.
That's right. Milchek will live in glory. That's right.
No idea. No idea. I mean, it's weird because I had been thinking that the MDR files were people, and now it seems like we're being told that they are rooms. But I guess they could also still be people.
They represent parts of people.
All the people would be Gemma.
Yeah, yeah.
It's any thoughts about the fact that it seems like she's the only one down there? I kind of thought that there'd be other people down there.
We've got what we know. We now have more than 200 other Lumen offices, so this is happening lots of places apparently.
Do we know that?
No, we don't.
Maybe not. Maybe this is the only Lumen office. We don't know. I mean, like they lie. They lie so much. You know, this is the tallest waterfall on Earth. It's been 5 months since the OTC. You know, they lie all over the place. But yeah, I mean, I do think that there are other Lumen offices.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it's still possible that this is the only Lumen office that is engaged in this project. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
We need to talk about Robbie Benson, who was great.
Absolutely.
He was great in this episode. And his outfits are hilarious. And I love when Drummond looks at him, he's like, why are you wearing that stupid sweater?
Why are you wearing that stupid sweater? He just gives him a look. Yeah, I loved it.
The fact that he also has facial hair sometimes and not other times. This is, I mean, why? Because I know that you can do this. Like they were talking on the official podcast about how Adam Scott's facial hair in the flashbacks is applied by the makeup artist, and he didn't grow stubble for it. Right. So like I know you can do that, and on the testing floor they could be doing that with Dr. Meyer, but like why go to all that trouble?
Yeah,
because I mean this is like very realistic fake facial hair. This isn't,
yeah.
I don't know, any thoughts on that? Why do that?
I can only think that it was maybe in the very, very beginning a sense of trying to maybe they need to try to disguise who this guy was, just in case the severance barrier didn't hold and she recognized him from room to room. I mean, it's kind of hard. It's pretty easy to tell who he is, regardless. But I don't know. He just represents someone that looks like that at the whatever this memory is that she's experiencing in that room.
Yeah, I don't know. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Because it could be along those lines of testing the barriers. So do you recognize him across rooms? But as you say, I mean, I think you're going to recognize Robbie Benson across like it doesn't he doesn't feel disguised to me
Yeah,
ever.
that's right. That's
His
right.
his eyes are so striking, and so on and so forth, right? Um, so I don't know, but it's there, and particularly the facial hair part. So it's one thing to just put on a new outfit, but the fact that he's going through fake facial hairs. Um, Chikhai Bardo, we should talk about. This is the fourth
Yes.
Bardo in Tibetan Buddhism, um, which I am by no means an expert on, but it does have to do with death and transition to death and a transmutation of elements and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. I definitely think it fits thematically. I don't know how much more I have to say about it. What about you?
Yeah, just that it represents a sort of crossing over time. I'm absolutely no expert in this, but this idea of Mark trying to cross over from a period of grief to what he becomes in a severed person, and Gemma in this state of, she's both, you can describe both, alive and dead at the same time. You're right. She's an outie at some points in time. She's in any other parts of time, and she's just in this moment where she's trying to cross into something, and she doesn't know what that is, and we certainly don't know what that is yet either.
Yeah. And Gemma mentions ego death. Can say something brief about that at least. I have some level of understanding here. I'm just not an expert really in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, but in Buddhism in general, that idea of um, kind of killing the ego, if you want to put it that way, is relatively central, right?
Yeah.
Desire is the cause of suffering, and so on and so forth. And um, so to, she interprets that card this
Yes.
way. The card itself isn't labeled or whatever, right? She's like, oh, that's Chicago. So, like, maybe the fact that she sort of got that right and that was the
Yeah.
idea is part of why she gets sucked in by Lumen.
Yeah.
Of course, we saw in OND other cards, and you know, it might be interesting. I'm not going to do this because, again, I'm not an expert on Tibetan Buddhism, but if someone out there knows more about Tibetan Buddhism than I do,
Yeah.
you go back to those OND cards and see if you can like link up each card to a different Bardo.
Eduardo. Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool. That'd be kind of fun. Thoughts about Cobell?
Yeah, this is really lending some stuff to the theory, and I don't know if Devin and Cobell or Devin and Selvig are keeping in touch with one another, but it's really lending some credence to the theory of perhaps Cobell is changing sides, right? Ragabi hasn't had any interaction with her, so still thinks she's a Lumen loyalist. Maybe Devin has come to learn that she's not. It's also somebody liken this to the Terminator 2 situation where she's going to come back, and instead of being the evil killing machine, she is in some benevolent way can help take care of them. I just wish she would come back so we could figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly, I know a lot of people are hoping that she's going to change sides, and I'm one of them. But I don't know if I think it's going to happen or should happen. I mean, we've talked about this before. She's a really interesting character, but it's hard to read her motivations.
Yes,
Now we haven't
yes.
seen her for a few episodes. Um, where is she at in, well, both physically and in
Hmm.
terms of how she feels about Lumen? Because she has been a devotee of Lumen, and Ragabi's right. She was like raised by Lumen.
Yeah.
You don't call up this woman. I'm out of here, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't think that Devin has been in touch with her. I think she knows that Cobell was fired because Mark told her.
Hmm.
I mean, he saw Mrs. Selvig, who he knows is Cobell. He saw her leaving her house and
Yeah.
so on because they
Yeah.
were neighbors. Um, so she has this idea of calling Cobell Did she maybe? I mean, we don't see her call Cobell, but it is
Yeah,
possible that she
it,
did.
it certainly is possible, and maybe that's that's the trigger that brings her back. She wanted nothing to do with this situation. She wanted to get as far away from Lumen and whatever Helena was going to do to her. But will something like this be the sort of the linchpin that brings her back? I think it's certainly possible.
Yeah, it would work narratively, right? On the other hand, I totally think Ragabi is right. It's like,
Yeah,
do not call that woman. I'm out of here.
yeah, really.
She's just going to turn us into Lumen and so on. Because honestly, even if we've seen that tension or what have you, um, I still feel like there's every chance that Cobell would say, like, oh, well, here's a new opportunity to get back in their good graces, which is what
Yes.
she
Oh,
really
yes.
wants.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
I think that there is such a equal possibility for both of those directions. That's what makes it so interesting, right? Is that she has had so much thrown at her from Lumen and has so disenfranchised that she goes the direction of helping Mark and Devin and all of them, or she's looking for any way to get back in, and this is the way to do it. I think that's equally possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that would make the most sense in some way would be for her to re-enter the story in a way that's against the powers that be at Lumen, but because she feels like they are betraying what Kier would really want. So
Yeah.
something like that sort of structure is what
Yep.
would make the most sense, right?
Yep.
Like, I'm the true devotee of Kier, you're perverting Kier's vision or something like that. So we'll see. I definitely expect that she'll be back in the story by the end of the season. I'll be disappointed at least if she isn't.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she has to show up by the end. I mean, that just must happen.
Yeah. All right. Other thoughts
Yeah.
about things, other things we need to hit on here? I feel like there should be more, but
We
in
have,
some ways, the broad points of this episode are, there's just
yeah.
kind of a couple.
And only one real story one real line to look through. I will say, as we were recording this episode, I got my, I guess, weekly email from Esquire, and the lead story is the best TV episode of the year. Talking about this
No, I
episode.
mean, it's just like I don't know, man. I don't want to argue with people, and I don't want to. I don't want to like. I never want to convince anyone that something is worse than they feel it is. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like that.
yeah,
I'm not trying to yuck your yums or anything.
yep.
I mean, I'll just say, in my personal opinion, this is not even the best episode of Severance this year.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That would be Woes Hollow.
yeah, that would be well solid. I did. Well, speaking of which, sort of, I did think of one more thing we should talk about. We didn't even get into our notes, which was an oversight on our part. The Mark Watcher, or whatever we call it, when we go
Oh,
into that room, and clearly Mark and MDR are under surveillance, and then there's four people, and we started wondering and exchanged a couple DMs about
mhm.
whether those were their doppelgangers who were
Yeah,
credited as shadows previously.
yeah,
But the one watching Mark clearly isn't. It's a different actor. Both actors
yeah.
are credited in the show credits, so that's a different actor. The other three, one of whom really does kind of look like
Like
Dylan,
Dylan.
and you could maybe see how one sort of looks like Kelly and the other one sort of looks like Irving. Maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't find credits for them.
No,
They're credited in Woe's Hollow,
yes.
but I didn't find credits for them and for those actors in this episode to be able to see whether they were the same actors or not.
Yeah. No, that I do just fascinated me. I mean, it's probably this thing defunct by the idea that these are separate actors, but yeah, I don't want to
Still,
completely close the door on that yet.
I'm glad I thought of this because regardless, there's a question of what are they doing there?
Exactly.
And my first read of that scene where Amy and Ed's going pretty fast and they're hitting their keyboards and all of that. My first read of that scene was that they're refining MDR.
MDR. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I'm imagining at this point that refining is, I don't know, they're refining this severed, like the chip in Gemma's brain or what have you. And so maybe everyone who is severed is subject to refinement.
That absolutely could be the case. I did see my brain going there as well. That would be fascinating. I really hope that's the thread they pull out some more once we look into whoever these people are.
Yeah, I hope so too. So we'll see. We've got what, 3 episodes left this
Yep.
season. It's just funny, man. Like I remember back after episode 3 saying, well, this seems to be progressing very quickly. Not anymore. Not anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah.
now I'm starting to wonder, like, are they going to get there by the end of the season? Like they're, meaning somewhere substantial in terms of what Cold Harbor is and so on. I mean, I think we know that the last episode of the season is called Cold Harbor. I think we
It
know
is.
that. So
Yep.
presumably we'll get some answers, and then I sort of have the feeling things are just going to crack wide open, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Definitely looking forward to the rest of the season. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up?
I think we've about covered it. Yeah, next week, Sweet Vitriol, the name of our episode. We'll see what that is all about.
That does kind of make me think about Harmony Cobell.
Yep, yep.
But we'll see. We have no idea. We haven't seen it yet.
We have not.
No one's seen it yet. Well, I mean, yeah,
Couple
Ben
people.
Stiller's seen it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Some people have seen it, but hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks as always for listening. Please do leave us a good rating, review, what have you. If you're on YouTube, press that thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel. It'd be much appreciated. And you can check out TVObscast.com. You can find articles from myself there on each episode of Severance, and articles on any number of other shows as well. Ryan's currently covering The White Lotus, for example, and I'm also on Yellow Jackets, and there is other stuff coming down the pike, like the Righteous Gemstones, Daredevil Born Again, the Rehearsal season 2, and I don't know, probably some more stuff that we're definitely going to cover. So check out the site. You can follow TV Obsessive on social media. Search for TV Obsessive, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week for episode 8.